Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I am your host, MGCovers. This is episode 34. Greatly appreciate you tuning in on a Monday morning. Tons to cover. Go ahead and give you the outline. We're going to talk about NFL. A lot of success with the new model here in the last 2 weeks. Also the same with soccer. Feel really good about this new soccer model. I've had a gazillion soccer models, but really excited and going to show you some results of that. And also, specifically, we're going to talk about the Lions game from NFL last night. It was a play via the model, but I did not personally wager on that game. We're going to talk about why. And that's basically our summary. So let's dive into this. So via the model, we had Tampa Bay, New England, Chargers, and Arizona and Detroit were all plays via the model. Now, if you go look at Tampa, obviously, we don't take the points in NFL. Advantageous to play the money line. I've covered this a gazillion times. Teams that win in NFL also cover 80% of the time. Teams that cover win outright 80% of the time. So it's advantageous to play on the money line. We had Tampa Bay almost won that game. They were driving there at the end, ended up kicking a field goal to tie it. And of course, San Francisco won it there late with a field goal, but still a really solid wager. Good game. And then, of course, New England plus 6.5. We got that one for. Go ahead and tell you what we had. Money line. We had, let's pull this up. For New England, we had New England at plus 240. We had Tampa at plus 245. If both those would have cashed, that would have given us, 5 units on only 2 plays. But instead, Tampa lost. So we still netted out between those 2 plays 1.4 units. We had Arizona at plus 114. That was a relatively easy cover there, and cover and win 31-6 over the Jets. And then Chargers -8, and they ended up winning by 10. So super excited. Let's pull up the I'll show you the betting log. We've actually gotten NFL to positive now. We were in a hole there to start the season. So basically sitting at 16-16 up plus 1.85 units. And you look at the last couple weeks, Washington was only play from 2 weeks ago, and the model went 4-1. And then the model this past week has gone 3-2. So we had New England with a win, 2.4 units. Tampa with a loss, -1 units. Arizona with a win, 1.14 units. And Chargers with the win. Now I want to talk about this Lions game because I think this is a very, very important point. And I'll show you my actual model. And if you look over on the right, you see Detroit -10. So it's actually a play via the model. And you look here, the line was opened at -3, and we got some late movement there, moving to 3.5, almost to minus. I think most books had it at 4. Yeah, Bookmaker had it at 4, and Pinnacle had it at 4. And if you follow me for a long time, hey, we have value via the model. We had a 6-point differential. Even at the 4, you had positive line movement. Why wouldn't that be considered a play? Now, there's only 3 lines in NFL. And if you're a client, you should already know this. I have a coaching video explaining this. There's only 3 lines in NFL. There's number 1, you have what I call the 50-50 game. And the 50-50 game represented in terms of lines is any line plus 3 or less. So if a line is +1, +2.5, +3, or -2, whatever, the book is basically telling you, hey, very difficult to pick a winner. This is what we call a 50-50 game, meaning if the away side, well, let me say this again. So if the home team is +3, generally that would mean the away side would have maybe a slight advantage because more times than not, the underdog is going to be on the road. But nonetheless, those are 50-50 games. So anybody can win them. That's one type of game. The next type of game is any line from -3.5 to -6.5. And why do I say they're all the same? Because in all of those games, whether it's all of those lines, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, in order to cover, that team has to win by a touchdown. So the second type of games I call are the touchdown games, meaning they have to win by a touchdown in order to cover, whether it's 3.5, 4.5, etc. And then finally, the last type of line is a 2-score cover, meaning team, if the line is 7.5, 8, 8.5, 9, 9.5, in which example that was the one we played with the Chargers, that means that team has to win by 2 scores, and very difficult to do in the NFL. Now, so when you think about it, though, you have those 3 types of game. You have the 50-50 game, you have the have to win by a touchdown, and then of course you have to, and then the 2-score line or 2-score game. So here's the reason why I didn't play the Lions. When that line was minus, if we were going to play it, probably should have played it at -3, and I probably did have clients play it at 3. So let's go back and look when it was a 3, because I think it was earlier in the day. I don't think it immediately went to, yeah, I mean, it was 3. Yeah, it was pretty much 3 the whole day. You can see there it opened 11:10 that morning. Yeah, early in the morning. Was that yesterday, 11:10? Yeah. Yep, -3 all the way up, and it didn't hit -3.5 till 6:51, and then had another bump to -4. And let me explain this. So more than likely what happened is you had, a lot of times people say, oh, Sharps played it at 3.5 and it went to 4. They actually more than likely played it at 3. So if they played it at 3, that means the line bumped to 3.5. Okay. And then of course everybody piled on to that point at 4. So for me, it went from being a quote, if I would have played it, I should have played it at -3 actual. That's probably a mistake, because the minute it goes to 3.5 or 4, it becomes that touchdown game, meaning Detroit has to win by a touchdown. Now, granted, my line was -10. However, if you go back and look at Houston, was a pretty good team and maybe should have won that game. Big comeback there by Detroit. Yeah, going in that game, Houston was 6-3. So even if you didn't have a model, Detroit was 7-1. That's more or less a 50-50 game looking at it. So I did sort of handicap subjectively like that. And again, because that line had moved, I felt like if I was going to, I lost value if I played it at -4 as opposed to playing it at -3. And that was a great decision in essence, even though I should have played it early. But the fact that the line, if I did play it, I would have had to play it at -4. So that was a really good decision on my part to pass on that game. So again, quick summary, even if you don't have access to model, remember there's only 3 lines in NFL. The 50-50 games, more times than not, are going to favor the dog. Then you have the touchdown games where you have to make the decision if that team's going to be good enough to win by a touchdown. And then you have the 2-possession or 2-score lines, and that's any line above from 7.5 or higher. All right, so let's dive into soccer here. And if you're new to the podcast or just new to my content in general, I created my first model for soccer in 2019. Most I have ever made with soccer was 3 units, and it was basically about that first year. The model I had, very simple, but just wasn't, I can't remember. I think we ended up wagering maybe like 100 matches that year. So the ROI was extremely, extremely low. And this has been an ongoing process. I've had maybe probably 10, 11, 12 different models, but I feel like for the first time ever, we've got something that actually is going to work long term. And what you're looking there in the green, this is the original way that I interpreted this model. It was 18 and 28 up 2.91 units, which is still pretty good. And that was from 10/27 until, let's see. Yeah, from 10/27 until through yesterday. So pretty decent volume. And then when I was looking at this tracker, I made a coaching video about this for clients, but I think this is very important, is that those of you that aspire to build models or do this on a professional level, you have to have a tracker, because once you have a tracker of, how you're interpreting the model, where you're calculating wins and losses, and then this, what I have blacked out here, this is actually part of the model. You would see the model if I showed this, which is why I can't show it. But in doing that, I was able to analyze the wins and losses, and I saw something that, hey, what if I had a stricter criteria? And this is very similar to Billy Walters' margin concept, meaning if a team had a significant margin, he would wager more. If they only had a small margin, he would wager less. So it's basically that same concept where I'm only playing the quote good teams. And if you look over here in the far right, that was the result of doing that. So over here, we had a total of 9 plays, and it went 6-3, and the net out of that was 7.25. So long term, it will not hit whatever that is, 70%. Long term, probably going to be closer to 50%, maybe less. But I want to show you something that's really neat. And just for the record, we actually, let me pull up the betting log for soccer so you can see this. All right, so this is year-to-date soccer here, and we did, those of you who follow me for a long time, we wagered soccer beginning of the year. We're up $8,000 and lost all that basically back to zero. And then with this new model, I started back 923, realized it wasn't going to work. And if you look at these last 2 wagers, this is part of the updated model. We had Brentford on Saturday that won at 1.64 units, and then lost the one yesterday with Nottingham at plus 180. So still playing dogs, and those 2 were positive. So year to date, 6-6, down just slightly there, minus 91 units. But I'm going to start wagering soccer for real with this model moving forward. Now I want to show you something that's really cool. So if you look over here, 10/27 through 10/27 through 11/10, that's basically 12 days. And with this new model we had, or this new criteria, we had 9 plays. So if you take 9 divided by 12, and the reason I'm doing that is to figure out how many plays this is going to produce per day. So that's 0.75. So then I'll take 0.75 times 30. And that means we're going to probably have 22 plays a month. So then if my ROI of those 22 plays is 10%, that will be 2.2 units. Does that make sense? In a month's time, times 12, that would be 24 units. So that would be a very good goal for soccer. And it might do well. It might do even better than that. I'm not sure, but I don't think realistically we can expect it to hit 70% long term. Again, probably going to be closer to 50%. Now, with regards to models, when you're really the key, and if you go back to this NFL model here, one very important thing to do, and this sounds so elementary, is that you have to find a stat or stats or combination of stats that correlate to winning. Without that, it's going to be very difficult to make that model have any kind of success, because what I've done with soccer, being able to just drastically increase that win percentage, and it's the same with NFL. At the end of the day, it's about, can your model predict who's going to win? And as you know, and whether it's NFL, whether it's soccer, college basketball, NBA, etc., the team that wins, the overwhelming majority of the time, they are going to cover. So that's very important. If, whatever stat you're using, is always focusing on teams that win. All right. So anyway, so that's a wrap for this podcast. A little bit shorter than normal. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. Don't forget to like this video, comment any questions or things you might want to hear me discuss in the future, and hope you guys have a great week. More content coming this week as well. Peace.